The morning light broke slow over the frontier town, spilling pale gold across the weathered planks of Main Street. Shadows stretched long, and the air still carried the hush of night, broken only by the hollow thud of horse hooves striking the dirt road. The mercantile stood with its shutters closed, the porch worn soft from years of boots passing over it. There, curled against the railing as though the boards themselves were a bed, a young woman slept. Her shawl was thin, her dress torn at the hem, and yet her face held a quiet grace, softened by dreams. Caleb Boone reined his horse to a stop, the leather saddle groaning beneath his weight. In front of him sat his daughter, small and bright-eyed, her hands clutching the saddle horn as she peered down at the figure on the porch. Lila tugged his sleeve with urgency. "Daddy," she whispered, voice like wind over grass, "why is she sleeping here?" Her words fell heavy, louder than a shout in the stillness of dawn. Caleb said nothing at first, his eyes narrowing beneath the brim of his hat. He was a man the town called hard, though not unkind, wealth heavy in his pockets, but grief heavier still in his chest. A widower for 3 winters, he had buried his heart alongside his wife, speaking little since. He dismounted in silence, boots crunching the dust. Onlookers from the boarding-house windows squinted and murmured. Boone's found himself another stray. Lila slid from a saddle, clutching her father's hand as they drew closer to the sleeping woman. Evangeline Hart stirred at their shadow, blinking against the sunlight. For a moment, confusion flickered across her face, then the slow burn of shame as she realized where she was, sprawled on a porch like a beggar for all the town to see. She pulled her shawl tighter, whispering apologies as if they might stitch her dignity back together. Caleb bent, lifting her with surprising gentleness. Murmurs rippled through the street. Clara May, keeper of the boarding house, clucked her tongue and muttered, "Imagine Boone stooping so low." The words pricked Eva's ears, and her cheeks flushed scarlet, but Caleb didn't glance at the crowd. Without a word, he carried her to his wagon, set her carefully inside, and guided his horse toward the Boone ranch. When Eva woke again, lamplight flickered against log walls she didn't recognize. A quilt covered her, patched but clean, and the air smelled faintly of fresh bread. She pushed herself upright, whispering apologies to the empty room. But it was not empty. Caleb's little girl sat cross-legged by the bed, a rag doll in her arms. "You can stay here," Lila said, her tone certain as gospel. She pressed the doll against Eva's hands as though sealing a promise. "Daddy brought you home." Eva shook her head, shame pressing down heavier than the quilt. "I shouldn't be here," she murmured. "I don't belong." Caleb appeared in the doorway then, silent as a shadow. He did not answer, only tipped his head once, as though the matter were decided. The days that followed moved quiet but steady. Eva, restless with guilt, insisted on helping, mending Lila's dresses, sweeping the kitchen, drawing water from the well. Her hands, though calloused, worked with care. She braided Lila's hair in the mornings, her fingers nimble, her voice soft with old lullabies. Yet when she caught her reflection in the wash basin, her eyes carried the weight of a question that gnawed at her. How long before I'm sent away? The town wasted no time sharpening its tongue. At the saloon, Clara May leaned across tables, saying, "Boone's got a woman tucked away at his ranch. Can you imagine the shame?" Sheriff Amos Kincaid overheard, his jaw set, though he did not intervene. Later, he found Caleb by the corral, offered a warning in his even drawl, "A man of your name, keeping a woman like her under your roof, it won't sit well with folks." Caleb brushed dust from his gloves, his voice low. "My daughter asked why she was sleeping in the street. That was enough for me." Eva, too, felt the sting of judgment firsthand. One afternoon she walked into town, coin in hand, to buy flour. The chatter ceased when she stepped into the mercantile, replaced by low chuckles and sideways glances. She held her head high, but inside shame curled tight. As she left, she caught Clara May's smirk and the whisper that followed, "She'll ruin him yet." That evening, Eva lingered at the ranch fence, watching the horizon as dusk painted the sky in rose and violet. She thought of leaving, of sparing Caleb, and his daughter the scorn meant for her. Her heart pressed against the bars of her ribcage, like a caged bird. She didn't hear Caleb approach until his boots scuffed the porch behind her. He stood beside her, wordless, the lantern light warming the planes of his face. Silence stretched between them until he spoke, his voice low and steady. "If you mean to go, go. But my little girl will ask for you come morning." The words settled like an anchor in her chest. Eva kept her gaze fixed on the fading light, torn between the pull of shame and the unexpected gravity of belonging. The night air grew cooler, carrying the scent of sage and dust. Somewhere in the dark, a coyote called. Inside, Lila's laughter floated through the window, soft as a hymn. Eva closed her eyes, listening, caught between departure and the fragile thread of hope she hadn't felt in years. Eva rose each morning before the sun, the air still sharp with night's chill, and set herself to work as though labor might pay back a debt she could never name aloud. She swept the porch, mended torn shirts, fetched water with hands rubbed raw, and when Caleb's daughter stumbled sleepily from her room, Eva was there with a gentle hand smoothing tangled hair. She told herself it was only fair, that she must earn her keep, but something softer threaded those tasks, the faintest stirring of belonging. Caleb watched her in silence. At first his gaze was guarded, the way a man watches a storm cloud to know if it will pass or break. Yet slowly his eyes softened. He saw how Lila lit up beneath Eva's care, how the woman's weariness did not strip her of grace, but wrapped her in it, like a cloak stitched from resilience itself. In the evenings, when the fire crackled low, Caleb found himself listening for her voice, though it came only in hushed lullabies and quiet reassurances to the child. Words she never offered to him. When spring's first thaw came, the church bell rang for the social, and Caleb did what none expected. He brought Eva along. She wore her only dress, patched at the elbows, her pride brittle as porcelain. The room fell to murmurs when they entered. Clara May's tongue was quick, Boone bringing her here bold as brass. Eva felt the stairs burn hotter than any fire. Shame welled like a flood. She thought of slipping out unseen, leaving them their whispers. But Caleb, tall and stern beside her, offered his arm, not with flourish, but with quiet certainty. His silence spoke what words could not. She stands with me. The gathering stilled when little Lila was asked to sing. The girl's voice trembled, small against the hush of the hall. Midway, her eyes darted to Eva in panic. Eva knelt beside her, steady hand at the child's back, voice soft as wind guiding a sail. The hymn held firm, notes carrying clear and true, and when it ended, the silence that followed was not mocking but reverent. Sheriff Kincaid gave a small nod, and Clara May's sharp tongue faltered, the weight of her judgment sagging. Yet the true test came not in whispered rooms, but in fire. One night, shouts split the darkness. Outlaws, half drunk, had set flame to the boarding house. Sparks leapt skyward, fire gnawed at timbers, and cries of children carried over the chaos. Townsfolk scrambled with buckets, their fear louder than their efforts. Before anyone could stop her, Eva ran into the blaze. Caleb shouted, his voice cutting through smoke, but she vanished into the inferno. Moments stretched eternal. Then through the smoke, she emerged, dress blackened, arms raw with burns, 2 coughing children pressed against her chest. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Caleb was there in an instant, his coat thrown around her shoulders as though he could shield her from flame and gossip both. His eyes, so long guarded, burned with something fierce and unspoken. The town watched, silent now. The woman they had mocked for weakness had walked through fire and returned carrying life. Clara May looked down at her hands, shame bending her spine. Sheriff Kincaid tipped his hat to Eva, respect shining plain. Days later, Eva lay in the Boone Ranch bed, skin bandaged, body weary, but spirit unbroken. Lila nestled close, whispering against her side, "You saved them. You're a hero." The girl's small fingers clung, as though letting go would undo it all. Caleb sat in the chair by her bed. Long he kept silent, until at last his voice broke the hush. "You've given more to this town in one night than I ever have with all my land." He reached across the quilt, rough hand covering hers. It was not a declaration, not a promise. But it was something deeper, an anchor laid quietly in the space between them. Outside, the prairie stirred with the first blossoms of spring, green pressing through the thawing ground. A new season, fragile but certain. And if you listen close, as though the old prairie itself were whispering, you might hear the lesson buried in their story. Is not wealth, nor the walls of timber that make a home. Is the courage of the shamed who rise, the faith of a child unafraid to love, and the quiet grace of a man who learns at last that silence, too, can be a vow. Remember this. Dignity is not given, it is chosen, and love is built not in words, but in the tender acts we cannot turn away from.